see, as well as I didn't get blinked at that point in time in the game. In fact, my Citadel of Dun didn't get anything, which kind of was worthless. And I'm forced to retreat again. So he's building up a pylon again, and is trying to sort of salvage, and he started to expand to the high yield. If we look at the income, my income is actually higher than his right now. I've got more harvesters, as well as sort of 2 bases mining, whereas he's only got 1, and I don't think they're either full of them or fully saturated. But I don't know exactly how I knew this, but I knew that he was expanding. Oh, I had a probe watching the sentry tower. The sentry, the watchtower sort of gives a large range of view. This whole circle right around here. So I kind of knew that he already expanded, and I quickly sniped that expansion, as well as pulling my army back, figuring he might try to attack me at this point. But being unable to, he sort of takes a little more sneakier approach. Something I had lacked this game was making sure I had sufficient detection in my base, because he's got an observer sort of scouting my base, and he's got a warp prism. The warp prism is a transport for a Protoss. It replaces the old shuttle, but it also has a secondary function of providing pylon power. When it provides pylon power, Protoss can use their warp gate technology to sort of warp in units. So he's going to do something very, very bad for me, essentially, at this point in time in the game. He still didn't notice that I had an expansion running, though, so that was kind of a good thing for me.
Mineral field depleted.
So, going back to everyone, I'm sort of starting to attack, and then I see that warp gate because of the pylons I had placed, and I realized what he'd done when he did it. So I tried warping some stalkers, because if I can take out the warp prism, at least he can't warp in more units. But I still got these Dark Templar to deal with, and I can't see him at this point in time. I didn't have enough photons. I should have placed a photon on this ridge, and maybe a photon behind the clouds or something. But so my army sort of got to flee around and deal with the annoying pest of the Dark Templar. And he starts going for my Nexus. And that's a very uncool thing. So I finally managed to chrono boost a observer out to my base and attack and get rid of the threat. I'm not exactly sure why he wanted to flee. I guess he figured if I had one that I was going to kill it. But at this point in time in the game, I don't think it really mattered that much if I had scouted it or not, because that warp prism did a fair amount of scare to me. It was a very psychological battle. I've actually been watching these 2 locations of a stalker and an observer, and I kind of figure, okay, well, you know, he's not expanding here, and once again my probe scouts off his expansion running, so I'm trying to destroy the Nexus with my 1 pitiful zealot, and I got some probes coming. I don't think that's going to do very well. I'm not exactly sure why I set my probes there. I think it was just a misclick. But I'm attacking his base with my Colossus. Something I learned this game, Colossus aren't as effective as Immortals in Protoss vs. Protoss. And, well, needless to say, my Colossus were a wasted resource. In fact, right now we're actually neck to neck in terms of battling. So, my units actually got caught. My poor Immortal Stalker died from his very good Blink Micro. And unfortunately, I sort of had to deal with this at this point. And I know I can't let him get an expansion up, so as soon as he gets it, my Stalkers are there, and start attacking his probes. He cancels it, fortunately, so he doesn't take any unit loss and resource loss. But my Stalkers are coming, and being, yay, we're chasing probes. Then I see he's sort of got his Stalkers, and I'm like, oh crap. And I sort of figured this, try to get him out. Kind of figured it'd probably be impossible, but he doesn't actually chase that much, so I should have just retreated. So I went forward, seeing what the heck he was trying to retreat to, get a little more intelligence, and I lost them all, which is a bad thing. In production, he's finally researching Weapon 1, and I'm researching Weapon Level 3. So in this encounter, I sort of have the weapon technology damage. So when ours, even if we have an equal number of Stalkers, my Stalkers have superior damage, which means they do a lot more damage than his Stalkers, so I need less Stalkers to be the same army equivalent. And I think that's one thing I did very well. I stayed ahead technologically, and made sure I was doing lots of damage to the guy. So, I took out this high-yield expansion again, so he's really been on 2 bases almost the entire game, where I've had this base going for a long time, and I've had my natural running for quite some time now, and the main's pretty much mined out, and I'm transferring all my guys down. At this point in time, I've got a fairly decent unit composition, I guess you could say, in comparison to his. We've kept primarily both using stalkers, zealots, so my resource advantage throughout this whole game, if we look at income, still about double his. Still got more harvesters. My resource advantage allows me to macro up more, and in addition to having expansions running, I'm not worried about being completely mined out right now. Like, his main base is mined out, so he's running off of 1, and I'm running off of 1.5 almost. But I'm trying to set up a gold expansion, figuring, well, hey, at this point in time, I need to warp in as many units to defend us and try to keep my, economy better than his. At this point, I really kind of suffered because I should have sent an observer to his base, but I figured he kind of masked up some photon cannons, so I wouldn't be able to do that. And he tries to sort of, I think, a more gutsy move, which is to set an expansion right here. If I had scouted that, I would have been able to sort of, I think, finish the game a little sooner than I end up doing. But basically, what happens is, with these couple pylons he built, he can warp in an entire army, and 6 photon cannons isn't going to hold back an army of Protoss, Stalkers, and Zealots. But at the same point in time, I'm setting up some more photon cannons and trying to secure this natural that has high-yield minerals. And high-yield minerals do allow you to harvest a lot faster, which is a benefit. And he's massing up more units. I think at this point in time in the game, my unit composition really was suffering because I should have probably gone into High Templar, Dark Templar, or maybe built some more Immortals, and I really wasn't. I was just relying on the warp gates a little too much, I think. I think at this point in time, with his scouting observer, he should have figured, hey, I'll attack his base again, because I don't know where his main army is. My observer's sort of scouting along this sort of ridge around here to make sure he doesn't expand here, and I kind of figure, well, if he's not there, he must be setting up here. So I start attacking. If we look at the army size, the units, we have about the same amount of zealots and stalkers. I have a little more than him, but my upgrades are really sort of what adds up at the end. Since I do need less units than him to equal, and I'm warping in units, he's warping in units, we're sort of trying to... This, I think, is about the turning point of the game, where it's basically like, if he can get this expansion running, we'll be equal in resources. Since I'm not fully saturated here, this expansion is almost mined out. But he retreats, figuring, he can't hold it, and I think this is the point where basically it's pretty much GG. I've always had a little more resources than him. We look at units lost. He's always been he's been losing a lot more units than I have. Not that much more, but enough to matter. And he warps in a Dark Templar again. Of course, stupid me, I don't have any observers. He sort of retreats his Dark Templar for a little bit. I'm not sure why he's sort of dancing around with this. Maybe he's afraid I'm going to get something going. My observer, however, was dumb enough and I didn't bring it. So, at this point in time, I'm like, well, my army's bloody large. Really bloody large. And this expansion is pretty much done, so I transfer my guys to a second high yield, figuring, hey, I've been in control of the map most of the game. I'm going to be pretty decent at this. He managed to snipe off an Immortal. That was my dumb mistake. And I'm still not pulling that observer into my army group, which I should have. Finally I do. So now I've got, in units, 19 Stalkers, 1 Immortal, 1 Sentry. He's got 4 Stalkers, a couple Zealots. So at this point in time, my army's pretty much enough to wipe out his entire base, and he's going to GG pretty shortly, I think, if I remember correctly. Maybe he doesn't do it at all, I don't remember. I go for that pylon again. I don't want the photon cannon detecting and killing my observer, especially when this guy's Dark Templar. With one base, he can't survive.